Hello everyone! So this is my morning face with a good hot cup of coffee. I have a little toast here that my oldest daughter made. She actually made the bread, so that was really nice of her and it's really good. And this morning, while it's still fresh in my head, I'm going to do the recap of session 35 of my campaign. It's a Symbaroum campaign. For those who are new to the channel, we are playing this excellent game of Symbaroum here. It's a Swedish game by publisher Free League. And we've had an awesome session last Friday night. And it was basically all role play. There was one short fight and all parallel scenes because the group has reconvened in Thistle Hold and they were pursuing different things. I will go through all of that. So we had to jump from one group to another, one subgroup to another, doing this parallel montage kind of session, which is always pretty challenging to GM because you have to keep the pace and you have to not get lost, and you have to. It's just a lot of to keep in mind in your head. But before I start, I want to thank Adolfo, who commented, I think it was a few weeks ago, that he loved to have the prep itself, the prep videos, and then the post-session videos. So I decided to make it a standard. So now I'll always do a prep video, then I'll play the session, and I'll come back to you after the session to just see with you guys what worked in my prep, what didn't work, if there were any holes, what went well, what should I do better next time, and all of that. And I guess for some of you, maybe even just following the adventure of this group of mine will be interesting in itself. So for today, there's, let's say, just the big takebacks of this session for me, at least, is that this is the perfect example of why I like to play deep settings. Some games have very light settings, some games have very deep settings, very rich, lore heavy. Lore heavy settings can be daunting to GM, can be like a lot of work. You have to sort of absorb all of that lore, and then you need to use it in a creative way in your adventures, and you have to avoid doing lore dumps on your players. So it really helps to have a poker face attitude for that. I'll talk about that later. So for today, we'll do the recap scene by scene. I'll try to go as quickly as possible. You can watch on 1.25 speed because English is not my primary language, so I'm a bit, sometimes I stumble. Also, just for the efficiency on my side, I need to keep editing to a minimum because editing is a long time, and I want to take 1 hour of prep for 4 hours of play, but if I have 4 hours of video production stitched to that, at some point it will be unmanageable. So please forgive me if these things sometimes are a bit rambly and then sometimes can wander, but I put chapters in the video so you guys can skip to whatever interests you most. I encourage you to just speed up the speed on the parts that you like less, and I'll just try to be as entertaining as I can while I do it. So there we go. So I'll just take a bite of this toast and we'll get started. Sorry about that. I took a much too big bite. Okay, that's better. This is my roll 20 for the game. I'll just it's the Thistle Hold page, so I put some of the official art. I have some character portraits on the side here. I don't have the portraits of the PCs available, but just so people that don't know the story, very simply, there's a guy is a blacksmith and mage of the Ordo Magica that has a shop in Thistle Hold. He had a novice called Wild, a Wild mage, ogre mage. Wild has become quite powerful now, Wild has made a friend in Laos, which is a small goblin called Bo, which is a self-taught mystic that believes he is a theory of Prios, because he basically was copying what the teachers and tutors were doing, and he was tasked with brooming the library, so he would read by himself and and he sort of created his own Church of Prios technique. So there's him. There's Miresin, is an Enoi barbarian from the north. He's a sort of a guide, and he's an exile or like a wanderer. There's Lodemei, a Templar of Prios, a young girl. And there's Mikariol. He is a young mage from Alberta. He was novice to a master that was studying the death magic, trying to find a cure. This master, of course, passed away and sent his pupil, Mikariol, to the Promised Land, to Ambria, to be taken under the wing of Master Vernam. Master Vernam is the friend of Mikariol's former master. So now Mikariol is attached to Master Vernam. Okay, so let's jump in. As I said, there's a few takeaways. The first takeaway is I love deep settings. Second takeaway is players actually can appreciate a session where there's parallel montage elements, as long as the storytelling stays lively and that you leave a scene on some kind of not a cliffhanger, but at least a promise of something else to come. And that's when you have to leave and go to another scene with another group. So the people are eager to come back to the scene. So it's basically like TV, before you go to commercial, you need to have a little hook. So the session started, they were all returned from the Vale, the blooming Vale in the forest. That was their first foray in Davokar. It was very hard, it was very tough. I'll show you the prep that I had for this. So this is my prep that I created in the last video. We'll see what I use with that. So when we started the game, they were at the shop, at least most of them were. Lodemei was at the temple. Mikariol was, I think, already at the academy. And actually no, it was just before Mikariol left for the academy for the night. So they were Master Tobela, the magician that they rescued in the Vale, had left for the Ordo Magica. Kulinan Furia, who sort of stuck around for a while in the shop, had left also. It's just before dawn. They're completely tired. They have this last little discussion before everyone goes to bed. And they decided to examine a treasure chest. Well, a treasure chest. I mean, a chest. It's a small chest that they had found in the tower. I don't have anything in my prep for that, because it was... That chest thing was basically just Bo. During the craziness at the tower, he was exploring rooms and trying to find stuff. And he, I think he'd made a crit or on a vigilant or something like that. I don't remember how. Or maybe it was Miresin that was helping him. And they discovered a very ornate metal chest inside a little hidden alcove with a very intricate design for the key. And they just didn't know what was in there, so they started looking at it. I had no prep for that, so I had to completely go up, improvise something. So I described to them how it was made, how it was really incredible that this metal survived the ages and that it must have some kind of enchantment on it. There were actual Symbaroum runes on it. They made a cunning roll with -5 and they succeeded. And they discovered that the runes meant Li Mi Karma. That's the name, a name that I made up on the fly. And my love, my wisdom. Those were the two inscriptions on the side. And what I decided to do is to go into the GM, in the GM guide, in the mystical treasures. I just decided, I didn't roll, I chose this one here. Whoops. So long-stemmed briar pipe whose bowl is shaped like a woman's face with her eyes closed. That's the inspiration for the whole everything that's coming out of this. So when they said we're looking at this, I said, okay, just give me a minute. Opened the book, looked through the list, chose that, and then I said, okay, it's a pipe. It gives bonuses to the oracle ritual. There's a woman's face, so it gave me the idea that this would be a gift of Na Etikel Ambriagos to his consort or wife or whatever. That would be a woman figure which has divination powers. Women in mythology often have those kinds of powers, and I thought that this would be a nice gesture from Naetikel to give her something that will enhance her powers. So that's why from that line in the book I created my love, my wisdom, because I wanted the idea of love, but I wanted the idea of something more than love, and that's the wisdom part. So Naetikel considered this woman his wisdom, like a very close counselor, a bit like the witch Yagaba with Lassifor Nightpitch. I see that relationship a bit like the same. It's love, but it's also a man leaning on a woman to give him insight and to give him knowledge and wisdom that the man doesn't have by himself. So they just discovered that, and I used what I wanted to set this cloak and dagger ambiance, and I described the sleeping city of Thistle Hold, the snow falling, showed them a picture. Again, I went to this picture that I like a lot. It's the one on top here. So I showed them this a bit close up, just so they have this twilight ambience. And the knocker at the door rang 3 times, and they opened, and it was Erlaber, Haras, and he was really polite but a little weaselly. I always. Right now he's sort of greedy, despicable. Not despicable. They don't hate him, but they find him like a bit ridiculous. He's like a greedy old man. And so he knocked at the door. He asked how they were doing, and he stepped in, and he sort of used, as soon as he could, ask a few questions about what the treasures were. And they quickly understood that that's why he was there. He wanted to know firsthand what was in the treasures. And they sort of wrapped up the conversation quickly, and they send him off his way. Send him off. And I wanted this really quick interaction because, as I said in my previous video, you need to have the world intervene in the beginning of a session, and in this case it was a slow burn because we just left those action-packed sessions. So I had I wanted to be slow, and the players helped me because they tried to explore that treasure chest. So it got us into learning new things about the world, interacting with the world. And so when they were talking a bit of what were their plans for the next days, then I had the knock come at the door after a short period of time, so that the world stays alive and stays interacts with them on a regular basis. I don't want to let them in this discussion space for too long. I of course I give them that space. It's fun for players to express their characters' views and to roleplay. So I totally give them that space, but I think every DM or GM hates when things start circling around. So that knock came, Erlaber comes, he leaves, Mikariol leaves to go to his bed, everybody gets to bed, and during the night, I just have a few descriptions on the two most two characters that had the more permanent corruption from all this are the ogre Wild, with four permanent corruption points, and the barbarian Miresin had two, or maybe it's the opposite. I don't know. And so they had really nightmares and sweats and fever, and I described a few of those nightmares, and then we got to the next morning. And the next morning we flipped to Lodemei at the temple, and she arrived with there was one Templar and his squire that were also saved from the Veil. They came to the temple. They're all weary and dirty, and they arrive at the hour of the morning mass, of the dawn mass, and they so that was a very quick description. I didn't want to play out the mass, of course, but they stepped in. There was a few of Thistle Hold residents, but mostly it's a mass that's for the liturgs and initiates of the temple. It's a moment where they get together. Elfeno was doing the mass, and after the mass, he calls Lodemei up to him, and they move into the vestibule where he can change from his red mass robes to his yellow day-to-day robes. And the one that is helping him do this and take off, he just stands, and an initiate takes care of, unstrapping and putting on new stuff, and that initiate is Anadea, as I had decided. So if we go back to my actual prep, that's background information. Don't need to roleplay. This I did as planned. And then for the meeting with Elfeno, it was improvisation. But of course, Elfeno, I've roleplayed him a few times before in other sessions, so I know him very well. I know what his agenda is. So when Lodemei arrived at the temple with the Templars she saved, and Elfeno called her up, I just wanted to create this scene where Elfeno is really... I like that he's being changed by an initiate as he's talking, because it gives him power. And this initiate is Anadea, so it's just a little super foreshadowing of this character for the rest of the session. And they talk a bit, and Elfeno basically... He asks for some information. He congratulates Lodemei, and he says that she is the first Templar to want to stay in Thistle Hold, and that he approves of that, and that maybe she could ask for more Templars from her temple to come to Thistle Hold. So there's this first political move there that's been done in this quick scene. After that, so we're sort of in the setup phase of the session, and after that, as soon as that discussion is done, she goes to rest and get cleaned up, and we switch back to the shop with the post-nightmare scene where they wake up and they're all... Some of them are really sweaty, some of them had made noise. But the first thing that really happens is a messenger from the Ordo Magica tower asking them to be there at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So again, I don't want to rush things along, but I always have a little thing to say, okay, we're doing this little roleplay scene, but there's something coming up pretty quick. And so the messenger has a little interaction with Idogai and tells them that they need to be there at 13 hour. And that, of course, the lesser members of the group don't need to be there if they don't want to. They're mostly asking for the Ordo magician Wild to be there. So it was those morning scenes, the wake-up scenes the next morning. So I wanted them to be pretty quick and to move from one group to another pretty fast. So after Lodemei at the temple, there was the waking up at the shop, and then Mikariol at the Vernam's academy, and he woke up also in his attic room. So I set up the scene, described a bit, and Vernam comes with a little cloth bag with some food in it and some hot goat's milk to accompany it. So it's a very like a bit fatherly I would say, fatherly kind of scene. And he comes up, he sits down. Mikariol, his medallion of the order has changed to master level because it's a magical. The medallions of the Ordo Magica are magical, and they change when the power level of the person changes. And so he noticed this in the morning, and he's really proud, and he's trying to show it off to Vernam as they speak. And Vernam basically tells him that fanatics, like, because Mikariol talks to him about the cell swords of the sun that harassed Edogai in the previous session, and Vernam tells him that those people are dangerous and they are there in Thistle Hold, and he has been harassed as well. And then Vernam cuts to the chase and asks him how was his experience in the forest, how he feels about what he's seen. And then he tells him that he talked to his friends. He got to talk to his friends, and the friends want to know how the group is faring, what they brought back, and they also want to know what's going on with the Copper Crown, because the Copper Crown, that was the evil artifact from the Adventure Mark of the Beast that we played earlier, is now controlled by the Ordo Magica in the tower. It's in a magic circle to contain its malicious energies. And the friends of Vernam are the elves, and they want the crown to go back to the tomb and stay there forever. And so that's what Vernam basically tells him. He says, that's what my friends want. They are worried that this crown is still at large. And so they have this little exchange. And then we go back to the shop, and during the morning, because all the characters, they woke up basically around noonish, because they got to bed at dawn. And so during this morning, Edogai, which wasn't in that sore state, he studied in his books to try to find information about that little chest, the chest that the characters suddenly took so much interest in and that I didn't prepare anything for. And so he succeeded at his role, and I just told him that the first word was a name, and that the two lines were like a flattery that was often given by princes and powerful people. It was a way to designate soothsayers, women with powers of divination, and a way to honor them, like an honorary expression. And so it gives them an idea, but they don't know what's inside. I just said that something is moving around when they shake it, and the goblin bow succeeded also on a roll, and he smelled the smell of briarwood. So it's not a type of wood that would grow in a deep forest. Then we switch back to we leave the shop as they are leaving to the Ordo for their meeting, and we switch to Miresin, the barbarian, who asks if he doesn't want to go to the Ordo, so he asks if he can go somewhere else. And he decides to go to the Witch and Familiar to talk to Alomar, to see if he can get some answers about his mark. So I had prepared for that. I think it's so here we have the Vernam part. So this I used pretty much as is. This part here, like some of that is background. It's I know it, but it's not known by the PCs yet. But this talk has been done, and here is the Miresin part. So Miresin wants to have answers about his birthmark. He's going to the Witch and Familiar to talk to Alomar, and I described, when they move around town, I always use the map, and I describe just very similar, with a few lines, what they see as they go in the road and which road they take, and because it makes the city feel alive. It gives it something tangible for them. It's when you look at a map. Of course, you don't want to be in maps all the time, but for for something like Thistle Hold, which is so dense, and they haven't been there that long. So I wanted to always have them. This is the shop of Edogai, and so he walked through here, went on Lassifor's Road, went through the Queen's Square, and was heading for the Witch and Familiar right there. And so when I described the Queen's Square using the tool that I created, that I showed you last time, or in one of my videos, I have this here, my notes about Thistle Hold. So this was really useful. So I used this description here, and then when he decided to go to, so you've got this here that I used, and then when he decided, he noticed that there was a lot of tools and stuff like that, so he was thinking, oh, maybe I'd just try to buy a heavier weapon, something stronger. So I described to him Big Basher's smithy, and he went there, and we had a nice little improvised scene where he talked to the journeyman Vanya, and he saw the whole scene with the goblins at the bellows, and it was pretty vivid. I liked it, and the ogre Bash is really like thick and short and bald and not really nice looking. And so he had this super long talk with Vanya because he wanted to buy a long hammer, and the long hammer was one of the last weapons forged by Hurella here, and so it was maybe a bit fine, had a finer look to it than what Big Basher does. And when they sort of, he says that he wants to buy it, and she asks, Basher, what's the price on this? And he just answers, it's not for sale. And then she explains to him that these are the last weapons of his former master. He's very attached to them. He won't sell them to anybody. Maybe you should come back, buy him a drink, blah, blah, blah. She wraps it in some cloth and puts it in the bag. She says, I'll keep it for you. And so that's just improv. That's just since we played this scene in a shop, I wanted something, a little twist, something more than just I buy the object. Because if you just buy the object, then don't play the scene. Just say, okay, so you go there, perfect. Choose what you want. This and this is available. Deduct that many taler, and we're done. And that's great. I do that most of the time when people want to stock up on stuff. But this time, the idea was to start creating scenes or interactions with Miresin and Thistle Hold, because up to now, my players, Edogai, the player playing Edogai and Wild has a boutique, a shop in Thistle Hold. He's read all the documentation on Thistle Hold. He has many interactions with the Ordo, with the treasure hunters, and so for him, Thistle Hold is like a living and breathing thing. Lodemei has her contacts at the temple. She has this whole area of Thistle Hold that's sort of her territory. And the Mikariol has Master Vernam and the Academy. And the two that were sort of left out was Beau with the Goblin. Still need to build a bit more for him. I have something for him, but we didn't get to play it. And Miresin, which needs to have this, like, what's the barbarian side of Thistle Hold? What's Thistle Hold to a barbarian? So that's why I decided to okay, let's dive in. Let's play this little scene with Big Basher, and let's give some meat to the Miresin version of Thistle Hold. So that was fun. And then he got to the actual Witch and Familiar, and that's where his sort of thread for the session started. And so I just described the Witch and Familiar again, using my description in my GM tool. And he stepped in. There was a lot of people. It was still like the end of noon and eating lunch, I mean. And he goes to Alomar, and they hug and talk because they're friends. And he asks him for some help, and he says, okay, I'll set up something with my mother. So I messed up there. It's supposed to be his grandmother, but I said it was his mother, so it's his mother now. As you know, the only canon that counts is what is said as the table. All the rest we don't care. like, like if you mess up for something not that important, stick with what you decided to tell the players, because there's I always say it's the truth of the narrative that you have to respect. And why did I make this lady his mother in the spur of the moment? Is because I felt the way I was playing Alomar, and the protective energy of Alomar towards this woman just feels stronger if it's his mother. So it just came out like that. It's gonna stay like that. And he said she can help you. She doesn't want anybody to know, but she is a witch, or was a witch, and she will meet you, but outside of Thistle Hold. She will meet you in the forest. That's where she has her witch circle. And he says, eat some, get rest. I even built a heating bed on the chimney upstairs for you. Not for him, but he built that so Miresin could use it later. And he said, I'll bring you to her later this afternoon. So that's again a way to switch from one scene to another, and always give that little promise of something coming up. Because I had played the Big Basher Smithy, and now this short scene where he meets with Alomar, so I needed to move on to the other players. So I went to the Ordo meeting. That was a big piece. The Ordo meeting is the kind of thing that can become so boring and so not easy to play out for that's a hard scene for a GM to GM. A lot of very powerful figures in a very formal environment with people making speeches and stuff like that. It can become boring, as it can be in real life, and it's quite the challenge, because you have so many NPCs that you need to keep in mind. So I had my list here. I described that, how they got to the Ordo Magica. The goblin Guldag, I think his name is, the Dolmen, brought them up. They come in. I described the room again that I already had from previous preps. They were there when Wild and Mikariol were received as journeyman wizards. We had this scene in this audience chamber, and I used the same chamber, so I already had the description in my previous notes. I used that, and I described everybody, and I knew very well what were the postures and standing of everybody, and not that many people wanted to talk at that meeting. So I mostly role-played Master Cornelio, being happy that this is over with, and just wanting to get the meeting done, get the spoils split between the parties, and let's just call it a day and bye-bye. But of course it didn't go that way. The other person that talked a lot was Tobela. So when they asked the group to describe what they did, Elfeno stood up and asked that Lodemei should be allowed to speak to answer that question, the Templar. And so she did. She started to answer this question, and she passed the ball to Tobela, because Tobela was there before, so she knew more about the Veil. So that was quite fun, because I had planned that Tobela would be like an emotional part of this meeting, and it was a player that handed me the mic, so to speak, so I could do this little bit. And I was in great shape. I don't know why, but I really got into every character, really felt them very well, so it was pretty easy to role play them. So Master Tobela was tormented. You remember that in the previous session I wanted her to be tormented, and I had not used that as much as I wanted during the Escape from the Veil session 34. So now was the time to really go for it. And so she removes the bandages on her face, and she reveals the scraped forehead, the split forehead with the big wound, the bits of the rune of the enslavement rune. Her half of her face is completely burnt by Mikariol's Brimstone Cascade. So she's in a very sore state, and she makes this moving talk about what she had found there, how they were trapped, how she was saved from a life of enslavement by these people, and how they must go back so the death of the victims, of the ones who didn't make it, can be useful to something. And I don't know, I just found the words, and it was pretty to the point. It wasn't too long, and I just closed it there. And people were agreeing, and Elfeno just stepped in. So that's a little juggling act for me, because I have to switch to another character, and I don't want to turn into monologue mode, but that's just what the story called for. And he basically tells the assembly what he told Lodemei earlier. He says, we need more knights. We need more Lodemeis on these missions, because we can't send greedy treasure hunters and mages greedy for knowledge all alone in Davokar. It's not reasonable, and blah blah blah. And so basically this whole to and fro with a good participation of the players led to what is written there, that an expedition should be organized. It should be this here. That an expedition is needed, but that it should be led by the church, that it should bring like a force of Templars to bear on these dragouls and whatever is left in there. There was the possibility that Naetikel could rise again was talked about and was a worry. And so that was a really nice, not too long scene. And after that, Cornelio left, Elfeno left with Anadea. I asked for some vigilant tests with minuses, and some Lodemei and Edogai, the mage, the blacksmith mage, succeeded, and noticed that Anadea was biting her lip and was really stiff-faced the whole time. And so Lodemei decided to follow Elfeno and Anadea from afar. So they left. And the rest of the people just did the bookkeeping, the splitting of the coin, and all of that. And Erlaber was very happy to have his part in that. And I skipped the witch here. I did not use this. I did not, because I was thinking, okay, we won't have like two suppers or meetings or in the same session. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to happen. And it didn't feel right. So I just skipped that. And then after that, I'm almost done. I'm almost done. After that, we go back to Miresin. Miresin the Barbarian with Alomar. They leave from the east gate of Thistle Hold. And they go to the forest. And they're using snowshoes. Alomar has some snowshoes, and they're walking in the snow, and they have a little chat, and he explains a bit more of why all this secrecy. It's that his mother is an exile, and she's wanted for something, and Miresin says he's also in exile, he understands. And they walk in the forest, and they get to a place where things get rocky and start going uphill, and Alomar tells him, you have to go on by yourself from here on. So he does, and in that same scene is combined with him arriving at the Dolmen. He succeeds, fairly easy, vigilant, to find the Dolmen quickly. Was it easy? No, it was -3, but he succeeded. He found the green Dolmen, and then he's there in front of this huge Dolmen, and it's not a real dolmen. It's just 3 boulders piled up in the shape of a dolmen, and that are lying on the flank of the hill. And the inside of the dolmen, the place where it should be like empty, and is actually filled with brambles and little trees. And so he tries to look around. He doesn't hack, but he moves in the little trees, doesn't find the entrance to the cave. decides to not go hacking at the trees or anything. He's just wondering what to do, and then he notices this shade. I used a frostlight from the core rulebook, so it's basically a kind of ghost. So there's this weird luminescent shape further off near the one of the boulders of the Dolmen, just floating there. So he comes out. He knows he's being tested by a witch, or he's looking for a witch. So he doesn't know what kind of enchantment this is and if it's good or bad, and so he just goes up, pulls out a sword. The light comes closer. It's a silhouette of a man, but it's very indistinct. He steps back, always with his snowshoes in the snow, with his Kotka fur coat that they had fashioned from the Kotka pelts that they got from when they crossed the Titans, and the creature comes up and just puts a hand out to touch him, and he doesn't want to. He moves back, and then the creature attacks. So I'll do a little zoom in at the end on this scene, but basically it's not a real attack. It's they want the warmth of the living people, and in this case they want to either suck the warmth completely or make the creatures flee, because they're protecting this entrance to the tunnels. But he suffers 3 points of strength damage, and so that was the first time for my players to discover alternative damage. They didn't even know it existed, so he was like, oh, holy shit. And so there was this little scene that I'll talk about later, because it's a nice action scene that's not really combat, that's quick, but that has some dice rolling, and it's really interesting. So that is resolved, and during that fight he avoids. First, he tries to avoid the frost lights, and then he hears a little twinkling of some kind of little bell or something, and he has this smell of greenery in his nose, and he escapes around the Dolmen and moves up the hill behind the Dolmen, and suddenly, going through some small fir trees, he steps onto lush grass and gets this heat of summer in his face, and we cut off there, and we go back to we're almost done, to Lodemei. Lodemei was following Elfeno and Anadea going back to the temple. They're all on horseback. She catches up to them just as they're unhorsing in front of the temple. They get in, and when they're in the vestibule just before the light garden, Elfeno notices her and thanks her again for her good talking at the meeting, tells her, asks her to basically put him in contact with her commander, and so that they could manage to organize this muster of Templars. And then he leaves, and Lodemei says, can I borrow your assistant? I need some help, I need someone to help me with something. And he says, of course. And he says a few little harsh words to Anadea too. He says that she should take Lodemei as an example. And then they leave. Lodemei brings the young initiate into her cell, sits her down, and it's really like an interrogation, like at school when you're sent to the director's office, the principal's office. It was really fun to roleplay. So I show them the portrait of Anadea at that point, because metagaming is part of role-playing games. If you always try to be too simulationist and want to hide all the clues about what is the plot or what is important and not important, you want the players to always figure everything out by themselves. That is not very useful most of the time, because the players aren't in the world. They are depending on your descriptions to imagine the world, and they can imagine it sometimes very differently than what you imagine. So there's like this little confusion zone around everything that makes getting insight and having a clear judgment on what is useful or not useful much harder. because you're not really there. You're just imagining things. So that's why the meta tools are used to get rid of that confusion and make things that need to be clear, clear. And in that case, using a portrait for Anadea says to the players, this NPC is just an initiate. She's clearly important. You know, she was set up at the beginning of the session. There were some vigilant rolls to see that she was not feeling like she seemed stressed out. Now she has a portrait. So of course this character has some weight in the story. What weight exactly, they don't know. But it's something that they can hook onto and get curious about and follow up on. So, so don't be afraid. At least that's what I do, and it works fine for me. So, you know, of each to his own. Some people really hate that kind of stuff. They prefer to really keep everything neutral and have the players figure everything out by themselves. I'm just saying that that means that it puts a lot of pressure on the quality of your descriptions, and not only the quality of your descriptions, but also the quality of your memos. How do you remind the players of things? Because sometimes they go back to certain places and you stop describing because they've been there already, but then they forgot about it. They forgot about the description. So if you don't come back with a reminder all the time, so how do you make those reminders short, to the point, not redundant, and also when you do a reminder, it is a kind of a metagame pointer towards something. So your players are looking for clues and for things to latch onto. That's just how it is. So I think that it's better to really play the storyteller, or at least it's easier to just say, okay, I'm a storyteller. I can bring the focus. They can choose to interact with this or that. They have their agency. That I'm not taking away agency at all. But you're just, as a storyteller, offering them things to interact with. And the pace at which you offer them these things combines with their own initiatives, and that becomes the pace of the story. So there you go. So they were sitting in this cell. They Lodemei wanted to know what's up with this little girl, and she started grilling her, and I played her like a young adolescent, feisty, pretty proud girl. And she for example, she asked that, she said, are you here to make me say things and then tell them to Father Elfeno? And will you swear on your honor that you will not, that what I tell you here will not get out of this chamber? And she wouldn't swear on that, Lodemei. So it was really interesting, this little mind game. But still, they came to a kind of understanding, and Lodemei was friendly and comprehensive. She wasn't there to punish her, and so it really made, like, the character of this Anadea that is rebellious, that is more aligned with the Sarvala's views on Prios. That was the point. That came through. And as soon as that scene was finished, that was a pure role-playing duel, and it was really, really fun. We went back to Miresin and the witch. She was sitting, her feet in the water of a little pond. There was a gurgling stream. I described all the summer vegetation around her. The gray-haired in the 60s. And they had this discussion that I had prepared, so I'll just go here. So I used here the welcome young Northman. She used that. And then he wanted to know, what's the sign, what does this sign mean? Because this sign had him expelled from his clan, had him derided by his peers, and he thought that it was bad. But then when he was in the Vale and he was suffering from corruption, the sign at some point actually calmed him down. At least when he touched the sign, it calmed him down and made him able to regain his composure. So he was really intrigued by that. And so she, that's where I talked about Wirtha, Ratha, and Wielda, Wielda and Ratha in the end at first. And she told him the description of these forces, what they are, in very, not cryptic, but very, witchy type description, but pretty precise nonetheless. And that was the first time that these words appeared in our campaign. So these principles that are so core to this whole setting were at last introduced in session 35, which is great. I really like it because I like that the players experience the world first and then learn about the lore, and the lore, just teeny bits of the lore, just explain what they've experienced already. So they first experience Ratha through the action of corruption, and they experience Wielda through the desire for conquest of all these Embryon characters. And so when you put words on them afterwards, it's sort of everything sticks together. So that was a really, really nice moment. And then when she puts her hand on the mark, she bestows witch sight for a minute. Okay, so the minute, we don't really care about that, but it just means for a short while. And so I described the land becoming just like the shape of the land staying, but being this smooth gray surface, and going down to a faraway horizon with a white sky, like as if it was a sundown, but the sun isn't a globe; it's the whole sky. And behind them, near the dolmen, 10 of those shades were standing, and he saw them very clearly. And she told him, this sign, this birthmark, is a kiss from an ancient spirit creature, or an ancient creature of the spirit world. And these creatures can be benevolent, they can be malevolent, they can be all sorts of things. She doesn't know which creature gave him this kiss, but she told him he was kissed while still in the womb of his mother. And she asks him, do you not see the shades? You are the chosen, and your destiny is not to be somebody else's squire. I actually use that line exactly as it's written. And it was great. And when they talked about, he asked her about corruption also, and how to get rid of it, or if he could. He didn't want to get rid of it. Actually, he just told her that he felt it in his bones. And she told him about this here. It's in French, sorry, but it means the wounds in the flesh of the world serpent are blight marks that rot the flesh, and similarly the wounds on him, these blights on him, will rot the flesh and do the same thing to him eventually. So I just started. She told him also that corruption was a word that the Embryons use, and that in the barbarian world we call it the blight. And that was it for this scene. Very, very nice scene. That's a little lore dump, but so well, integrated into the mood of all of this that it didn't feel like a lore dump at all. And at least it was a lore dump. It was some information that the player was seeking. So players are receptive when they're looking for something and you give it to them. They're happy. So that the scene ended when they both left the circle and went back to town. When he got back to town, I just decided to lighten things up a bit. We were reaching the end of the session, and I wanted to make things a bit more lively. So I decided to, Alomar received him, and they broke a cask and started drinking and eating and having fun and, just decompressing. And then this messenger arrives, and it's a messenger from the Ordo Magica with a big bag full of the silver platters and the gold coins and his part of the mission, of the profits of the mission. So he's suddenly super rich and he's already a bit drunk, so he pays tons of beers to everybody in the tavern, and that's how it ends on his side. The last scene that we did, I did the scene between Lodemei and Deseba. And Deseba, and now I'll just, there it is, here, this one. So this scene, my logic was that Deseba knows that Lodemei has asked Anadea questions. Anadea is close to Deseba, and she, after meeting Lodemei, she went up and she talked to her and told her that she was being grilled. And maybe vented some frustration too with Deseba. So this Deseba picks up Lodemei as they're going up to the mess hall to have supper. And she asks her to help to climb the stairs to the mess hall. And I say that they start talking, and I say that she stops to talk to Lodemei between two oil lamps in the stairwell. So they're like in the darkest part between two oil lamps. So it's again this little cloak and dagger conspirational atmosphere that I want to keep. So they have this little discussion there, and Deseba tests her to know what she thinks of the darkness, what she thinks of Prios, and she basically, what I wrote there is pretty much what I used. She says texto a lot of that, and so those barks, I was saying that barks are good, that I like it because it encapsulates a lot in a few words. They've been really useful for me in this session. I was really happy to have written those things, and so once she knows, because Lodemei answered the right way, she was saying that she's still not filled with doubts, but she's still, I don't know, maybe humble towards knowing what Prios wants or not. And I did a little game where she asked her, once the battle against darkness is won, what will Prios ask of us? And she answers, Lodemei thought about it and answered, probably to be there for the ones we love, and things like that, like really good Christian kind of stuff. And that was great because it was exactly what Deseba wanted to hear. And then Deseba basically plays the quest giver and tells her that she needs her to do something for her, and in exchange she can find some water of the dusk to help heal her friends. And she says that Sarvala is being harassed, and that these people that are harassing Sarvala need to be silenced, either exiled from this town or otherwise. That's pretty heavy. So, and that's how we finished session 35. So, if I just go back one last time to this here. So, if you look at what I prepared, the Killinan I used, snooping Erlaber I used, the meeting with the creditors I used, corruption and healing I used the Deseba and Lodemei part. Winter Comes will be for later. And I used Vernam's Friends Want the Crown. I did not use the Feast at Lassiforce. It's all in French, but I'll translate it at some point. I didn't use any rumors because that will be for the downtime. I did use the Miresin's questions. I did use some of this. I can say a little word about this. And what's the last thing? And this part, Jurgois, was already written for session 34, but I had it here because I want him to become something for Beau. I want Beau to have his own Thistle Hold. So I want to start creating something on the alchemist side with him. This is a rumor that I will have Jurgoi say to Beau. Those are the stats of Agdala. that I changed a bit from the original. Okay, so you see that I used probably, I would say, how much? 85% of what I prepared. So that was really to the point. I'm super happy of how the scenes went into one another. And to finish this video, there's two things I want to do. There's a little zoom in on the Dolmen scene really quick, and I want to talk about what are the advantages and disadvantages of a deep setting. So, and first, before I do that, I just want to, that's just a little thing here that I find interesting that I'm starting to create. It's just for my players, a big part of the interest with this game in the deep setting is the fact that we are a bit like Indiana Jones, sort of revealing layer by layer the mythologies and the conflicts and the past and all of that, the history of the setting. And that is super interesting. And it has to come from players interacting with the world. And the way that I'm trying to deal with it as a GM is that here is the story of Hurian Loapak, like who he is, what he did, and how he killed Ramaran and the Drought Araka, the toad, and blah blah blah. So that's the truth of what Hurian did as a king in the Symbarian times. And what are the clues that can be found to describe this? So there's the mosaic and in the tomb. That's part of the adventure Tomb of Dying Dreams. There's a book that I just invented called The Princess Queens of Symbaroum by Lore Master Mirtagam. And this describes the queen sorceress Lapi Esha that had giant snakes. She conquered the lands of Uriel Loapak. So that's part of the description of one of the artifacts. I don't remember where, in which book, but I just do, I do find, and I did a find for Uriel Loapak, and I just gathered all that's published about him, and then I stitched some more stuff onto that. So that's something that they can find about him. And there's the Song of Caspar, a Zarek cautionary tale, because I want to have some barbarian culture also in these things. So this is written in English and translation in French. So just a few lines that talk about the Mano, and Mano is the big toad king god that is in what's the name of the island in the Witch Hammer. There's an island in Lake Volgoma, and there's a pyramid, and there's this toad thing in there, and so it's just some information about him. So it gives some clues to what is the toad Drought Araka, or is it Rakara? I don't remember, but whatever. So I'm just creating these things so when they do research, like library research, if they ask witches about stuff, if they do that kind of information seeking, I have really cool little tidbits that I can throw at them. So that's why I'm creating those things. I'm going to create more related to many things, to the nature of changelings, to are the elves evil, did the elves plant Davokar for real, all sorts of things that I can put in there, like the origin of humanity and the tons of stuff that is lore that has been slowly revealed in all the books of the Throne of Thorns campaign. So those things I'll just make them even more cryptic and create some clues that they can find, and I'll just feed them clues as we go along, session by session, so they can sort of get an idea that's even more precise as they move along through the different adventures. So that's the first thing, a little side thing I wanted to talk to you about. Now, I think I'll finish with the little zoom in on the Dolmen fight. I'll just talk about what are the advantages and the disadvantages of a deep setting like Symbaroum. Symbaroum has one of the deepest settings I've ever seen in the many games I've read. It's I know people really complain that it's spread out so much on over many books, and that some information are in the artifacts section. Some it's all over the place, and there's at least there's one positive thing, is that the parts that can be read by players are pretty clearly identified, and the GM sections add a layer of mystery that you can use in adventure to reveal stuff about the world that the players will only have maybe little hints or clues at on their side of the book. So that's cool. That's cool. That's really good. How do you get over the fact that it's so big and so spread out? And I would say that's the, like, in the pros and cons. The pros, let's start with the cons. The cons of a deep setting is just reading, compiling, and learning. It's becomes like a job. It's like reading the history of France or something. You really have to get into it. You have to connect the dots. You have to sometimes write little memos like I do, and sort of compile stuff together to sort of see a bit more clearly what's going on, especially in this game. So it's quite the commitment for the GM. It's really some time. So that's a drawback. That's, for many people, it's the major drawback. It's a turn-off drawback. they won't get into it at all because of that. And the other, even more insidious problem or danger of deep settings is that it's canon. That word. I know how GMs that don't want to stray from canon feel, because I was that GM for many, many years, like probably for 15 years of GMing. You have this idea that this fictional world is a real world, or at least needs to be, so everything must stay consistent, logical, created in advance, and when the players discover things, those things have existed before they got there. They're not tailored to their taste. They're there because it's a world and things are just there. And even if you take it from a narrative standpoint, like for GMs that are maybe more on the storytelling side of things, they want to respect canon, like who is who's brother to who, how old are they, the NPCs, what are their motivations, why, and you can't stray from that. Like it's an anguish to stray from canon. And when you come into a deep setting with that mindset, the setting becomes your prison, because you're always scared that you're going to screw something up, and you sort of need to double check everything all the time, and it becomes such a heavy task that it's not fun anymore. It's just work. And sometimes you have a great idea for something, for the story, and then you read that something in the canon makes that impossible, and you just go, darn, can't do it. So that's a big danger for me. That's why I think that's what liberated me from this pressure. Is I just decided at some point, I said, okay, this is storytelling, and the only truth that will stand in my game is what has been presented at the table. As long as I haven't presented this to the players, it doesn't exist really. So it can change. So people their motivations can change, their age. Now in this session, Agdala became Alomar's mother and not his grandmother. In the book I just read this morning, she's bitter, and she hits on him because he didn't produce any grandchildren, and she's sort of an old whiny, I can't say that word in English, septuagenaire. So I didn't do that at all. I made her more like a pretty wise and friendly woman, younger, fitter, and she's her mother. And I don't know what I'm going to do with the bitterness. You know, the bitterness is there in the book, it's there in the canon. I said, oh, maybe I'll use it. Maybe she could be bitter with him as a front, or to make people stay away from her because she doesn't want to be known. But when she accepts to meet someone in her circle, you get access to to who she really is, because she accepted you in, and she will give you her real self. So that's my idea for now. But anyways, it's not important because we always prep session by session. So we'll see. Will this character come back later on? Probably, maybe not. So it's not my problem right now. So there you go. For deep settings to really flourish, you have to see it like just a mass of interesting stuff that you can use to craft your own world and your own narrative. And that's when deep settings for me become a real boon. And what are the pros of a deep setting? Well, I've had multiple payoffs of that setting this session. The scene with the witch, the fact that I knew what the spirit world looked like, that I knew that Oroke, the goddess of the Enoi, is a spider goddess, that she has been wounded by Hurian Loapak, who stole her glands of poison to make the vile nectar, and that she's deeply wounded and she's retreated in the spirit world, just like Xanata, her daughter, did. And Xanata, later on, when they do Tomb of Dying Dreams, they'll meet her and they'll meet this creature that left the spirit world to come back into the real world. But for some reason, Oroke stays in the spirit world. So all these things are lore from the setting, things that I've read in the books, that I hooked on, that I find super interesting. When I read Mother of Darkness, there's this whole sub-section on the return of the Spider King. That's super interesting. I'm going to use that for sure. So in session 0, when the player decided to have this birthmark, he wanted it for background purposes, just to explain why he was expelled from his clan. But I immediately thought of the bite in the neck from Xanata in Tomb of Dying Dreams, because I had read the adventure and I knew what was coming up. So that's an advantage of using published material, is that you have things to look forward to, you have things to foreshadow, you have seeds to plant everywhere, and you just need to do it in advance. So I would say that it's a good strategy to for lore heavy settings is, of course, you read as much as you can. You use the find function of your PDF reader to go zoom in on different elements. And you sort of just have a little layout of, okay, I want to play this adventure first, then this one, then this one. What are the elements in these adventures that I can foreshadow, and how? And what do I need to do to foreshadow this or that? And you don't have to look that far. I mean, you can be playing an adventure and you just read the next adventure and you'll just foreshadow for the next adventure. And that can be enough. You don't need to have a mega campaign of 7 books in mind. And the payoff of that, in my experience, is just that because you're seeding things and things come to fruition later, I don't know, it really makes the players maybe a bit more curious, more involved, that's for sure. And it just, the dramatic impact of when things bloom and things are revealed is so much stronger, and it makes for really, really strong roleplay scenes, and that's why we play the game. So that's it for the deep setting discussion. I think you can tell me in the comments what you think about it. I realized that over the years I've always favored games with deep settings. I really like playing role-playing games for the theatrics of it, for the gambling part with the dice. The fact that we don't know where the story is ending, is going, that's great. That I'm all for that. We play to reveal where the story goes. And I also like role-playing games to discover worlds. And I use role-playing games also in a way, like for example, we're experiencing a semi-medieval setting in Symbaroum, and I like that it makes us travel through time in a way, because to depict this medieval setting, I have interest for medieval history in the real world and how things were done, and all this is crammed into the game, and it makes for a very rich experience because you get to experience this time travel aspect, you get to do some theatrics, you get to push your luck and roll dice, you get to reveal mysteries and have narrative build up and releases, and it's much more ensorceling, or it's much stronger than just the big bad boss fight that everybody talks about all the time. It's like, who cares? Seriously. I mean, of course, you want big, you want some critical big combat scenes with enemies that you really hate, but it's not the point of the game. It's just, it's in the wave of the story. At some point you need some climax and you need some resolution, and you need some enemies to get beaten down. You can't always be fighting the same enemy forever. So you need those big fights and those big, but they can play out not as a fight. I mean, if your player characters are super wily, maybe they'll just assassinate the poor dude, or I don't know, they can be really efficient and they can get to their victory without a big scrap in some kind of funky terrain. That's very for me. It's just like a video game take on it. It's a bit also a movie, action movie take on it, and it's cool like many times, but I think that what really holds everything together is this build up of all the threads of the story. And deep settings are, they give you so many tools to get there, but you just have to forget about canon. Canon is not important. The only thing that is important is what is going on at your table. Okay, so I know most of you already know that, but I still wanted to say it because it's really important for me, and it's been paying off a lot in my last campaign, in the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay campaign, and in this one it's off to a great start, so I really like it. So the last point, it's like a little bonus. Before I get to that, I'll just say again, if you like what I do, even if it's a bit rambly and a bit long, please subscribe, like, all that good stuff. Go check out my adventure playing with goblins on Drive-Thru RPG. If you want me to publish some of the things that I show you, you can comment to me and ask for a copy of this or that, and I'll send it to you, no problem. Okay, and so the last little bonus thing was about this scene with the Dolmen. So the Dolmen, what I wanted to say, it's very, very quickly, it's just the fact that he was fighting these frostlights, and he used full defense quite a lot because he was really scared of the alternate damage. And so even if we were using theater of the mind, when I was describing him dodging the enemies, because you can't stop a shade with a sword, you can't parry a shade, so he could only back up, dodge in his snowshoes. So he was having there were some minuses to his rolls because of that. And I told him, you can dodge all the way, you can dodge for a while, but at some point you're going to get tired, and the minuses are going to get higher. And so he dodged one, dodged again, and then noticed another one coming back. They were doing a pincer move on him. And so he sort of dodged out to put them both on the same side. So that was all theater of the mind, but that's what he described that he wanted to do. So by doing that, the two shades were on the same side, and the other side was open to run around the dolmen and flee up the hill to go see behind the dolmen. And when he did that, I had decided that the shades only wanted to stop him from entering the cave. So when he fled, they didn't pursue. So it wasn't a life-threatening scene, but the strength of that scene was the fact that he did not know what they were at first, if they were a threat or not. He did not know that alternative damage existed. So when it hit him, he was really, like his whole arm was almost paralyzed with cold, and he was really shook. So that was a little interesting bit. And also the discovery of the details of what these creatures were. They were very vague at first. When they got closer, he saw some human features. And lastly, when he had the spirit, the witch sight, temporary witch sight because of the witch, he got to see their real faces and to see that they were barbarian warriors. And I described them at that point. So this action scene was more like a setup. It was more exposition than action. I mean, narratively. I wanted to expose the fact that there are some shades there. And one of the players, that was really funny, the player that's playing, Mikariol, the mage, at the end of the scene, he said, man, why didn't you ask the witch, what are these shades? And the barbarian player said, my barbarian is used to the idea that in the forest there are shades, there are strange spirits, there are spirits of the trees, and that's not that bizarre to him. So he didn't think of asking it. But now all the players want to know. So that's the exposition I wanted to make. To say, okay, there's this dolmen, and there's some shades around it that want to defend it. Why? So that's again a seed planted in the ground, and it's there. It'll bloom or not. We'll see for in future sessions. So there we go. So next session will be they will do the investigation of the cell swords of the sun, and we'll get some action there. That's for sure. I'll do my prep probably in a week or so. I'll make a video about that. And I guess, yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens next. It's always unsure. One session at a time is the rule. So there we go. So thanks for watching, and hope you liked this little deep delve in very detail on the session recap. My other recaps will be quicker than this one, but since it was a first and that the session was exceptional, I wanted to go a bit more into the weeds about it. So take care. Don't worry about the prep. Keep it light. Keep it bright. And see you soon.